My name is Lira Ashwood, and I am the wolf that other wolves fear. Not because I'm strong. I'm an Omega, the lowest rank in the pack hierarchy, born to serve and submit. Not because I'm dangerous in traditional sense. I've never won a fight, never challenged an alpha, never even raised my voice in defiance. They fear me because of what lives beneath my skin. Shadow magic. The dark mark on my left wrist proved it, a spiral of midnight black that pulsed with its own heartbeat, spreading tendrils up my forearm like corrupted veins. It had appeared on my 16th birthday, the day most wolves experience their first shift. While my peers transformed into beautiful, powerful wolves, my body had convulsed with a different kind of power. Shadows had erupted from my skin, wrapping around me like living smoke, and when they finally receded, the mark remained. My pack's healer had taken one look at it and declared me cursed, tainted, an abomination carrying forbidden magic that hadn't been seen in generations. My alpha, Darius Blackwood, the wolf I'd loved since childhood, the male I'd dreamed of being mated to, had looked at me with disgust instead of desire. "You're not one of us," he'd said, his voice cold and final. "That mark proves you're touched by something unnatural. I won't have corruption in my pack, and I certainly won't have it as my mate." The rejection bond had been severed before it even formed. Omegas weren't supposed to be rejected. We were too valuable, too necessary for pack cohesion. But Darius had done it anyway, declaring me an exile in front of the entire pack. No trial, no appeal, just immediate banishment. That was 3 years ago. Now, I lived alone in the border territories, the no-man's land between pack domains where rogues and outcasts eked out miserable existences. My shelter was a half-collapsed hunter's cabin that leaked when it rained and froze when it snowed. I survived by scavenging, stealing from pack territories when I was desperate enough, and using the one gift my curse had given me, the ability to heal. Not normal healing, not the kind that pack healers perform with herbs and light magic and careful ministrations. My healing was shadow touch, dark and invasive and wrong. When I used it, black tendrils would spread from my hands into the wound, consuming the damage like hungry smoke. It worked, better than normal healing. Actually, sealing wounds that should have been fatal, but it left traces, dark veins that faded slowly, marking the healed as touched by forbidden magic. No one wanted my help. Most would rather die than be saved by shadow magic. So I lived alone, haunted by my rejection, surviving day by day in the space between pack territories, watching from the shadows as other wolves lived the life I should have had, until the night I found him, the dying Alpha King. The scent of blood hit me first, thick, copper-heavy, saturated with the unmistakable signature of alpha power. Not just any alpha, but one whose dominance was so overwhelming it made my Omega instinct scream in confused terror and desperate submission. I'd been scavenging near the border of the Crimson Veil territory, searching for wild herbs I could trade to a rogue merchant for supplies, when the smell stopped me in my tracks. Every survival instinct I developed told me to run, to get as far away as possible from whatever battle had produced that much alpha blood. But there was something else in the scent, something that called up part of me I didn't understand, a pull that went deep in fear or logic, tugging at my chest like an invisible rope. I followed it. The clearing was a massacre. Bodies of wolves, at least a dozen, lay scattered across the blood-soaked ground. They weren't rogues or Omega scouts. These were elite warriors, their armor bearing the marks of different packs, all united in what must have been an ambush, and they'd lost. At the center of the carnage lay a single wolf. He was massive, Even by Alpha standards, his body easily twice the size of Darius in wolf form. His fur was midnight black, so dark it seemed to absorb the moonlight, and even unconscious, his presence radiated power that made my knees weak. But it was his wounds that made me gasp. His left side was torn open, ribs visible through the shredded flesh. A massive gash across his throat pulsed with blood that glowed faintly silver, the sign of a magical attack, not just physical violence. And worst of all, dark veins were spreading from his wounds, pulsing with sickly purple light. Cursed magic, something ancient and deadly, designed specifically to kill alphas. He was dying, minutes away from death, if that. I should have left. This wasn't my fight, wasn't my problem. Helping an unknown alpha could bring a dozen different packs down on me, especially if they thought I was involved in the ambush. But that pull in my chest intensified, becoming almost painful. My shadow magic stirred beneath my skin, responding to something in his presence, demanding I act. I knelt beside him, my hands trembling as they hovered over his wounds. Up close, I could see details that made my breath catch, the perfect symmetry of his wolf form, the pure power that radiated from him even in unconsciousness, the faint shimmer of his aura that marked him as royalty. This wasn't just any alpha. This was someone important, possibly the Alpha King himself. Kaelen Stormcrown, ruler of the Silver Peak Kingdom, the most powerful werewolf territory in the realm. And he was known for one thing above all else: his absolute merciless persecution of anyone who practiced forbidden magic. I'm an idiot, I whispered to myself, but my hands were already moving, my shadow magic already rising in response to his need. The mark on my wrist burned as I called the power forth. Black smoke emerged from my palms, tentacles of living darkness that reached for his wounds with hungry precision. The moment they touched his flesh, his body convulsed, but he didn't wake. The cursed magic was too deep, keeping him trapped in unconsciousness while it slowly killed him. I poured everything I had into the healing. The shadow magic flowed from me in waves, consuming the curse first, devouring it like darkness consuming light, before moving to the physical wounds. The torn flesh knitted together, the exposed ribs sliding back into place, the magical gash across his throat sealing with dark, intricate patterns that would fade to scars. But shadow healing had a price. Not just exhaustion, though I felt that acutely, my vision swimming, my hands shaking with the effort channeling so much power. The real price was the mark it left. As I healed him, dark veins spread across his chest and throat, visible proof that forbidden magic had touched him. If he woke and saw those marks, he would know, and he would hunt me to the ends of the earth. I should have stopped there, should have fled the moment his wounds were stable. But the pull in my chest had intensified to the point of pain, and my shadow magic wasn't finished. It surged toward him one final time, not to heal but to connect, forming a bridge between our essences that I didn't understand. That's when it happened. The fated mark. Pain exploded across my throat. Not the gradual burn of normal marking, but a sudden, overwhelming eruption of sensation that felt like being branded with molten silver. I screamed, my hands flying to my neck, and felt raised skin forming beneath my fingers. The mate mark, the fated bond that only appeared between true, destined mates. But that was impossible. I was a cursed Omega, rejected and exiled. Omegas didn't get fated mates. We got chosen by alphas who wanted to use us, not cosmic bonds that transcended pack politics and personal choice. Yet there was, burning into existence on my throat, a silver crescent moon surrounded by intricate patterns that seemed to shift and move beneath my skin. The mark was beautiful and terrible, placed on the most visible part of my body, impossible to hide, and it was connected to him. To the dying Alpha King I just saved with forbidden magic. Through the new bond, I felt his consciousness stirring, felt the moment his awareness began to return. In seconds he would wake. He would see me, see the dark marks of my shadow healing, see the mate bond blazing on my throat, and he would know exactly what I was. Terror overrode everything else. I stumbled backward, my legs weak from magical exhaustion and shock, and forced myself to run. Every step felt like tearing something vital inside me. The mate bond protesting the distance, demanding I stay with my alpha, submit to him, let him claim me properly. But I couldn't. Kaelen's Stormcrown would rather kill me than accept a cursed Omega as his fated mate. His reputation was clear. Forbidden magic users were executed on sight, no exceptions, no mercy. I ran until my legs gave out, until I collapsed in a hidden cave miles from the battlefield. My hand pressed against the burning mark on my throat. Through the bond, still new, still raw, still forming, I felt the moment he woke. Felt his confusion turn to fury as he discovered what I'd done. Felt his alpha power surge as he began to hunt for the Omega, who dared to save him with shadow magic, and then flee before he could enact proper justice. I curled into a ball in the darkness of the cave, tears streaming down my face, knowing that I just made the biggest mistake of my life. I'd saved my fated mate, and now he was going to destroy me for it. I jerked upright, my hand instinctively going to my throat where the fatal wound should have been. My fingers found only smooth skin, faint scars, and something else. Dark veins spreading for where the cursed poison gash had been. The veins pulsed with residual magic, the signature unmistakable. Shadow magic, forbidden, ancient, and supposedly extinct for over 2 centuries. Someone had saved me with it. My beta, Marcus, was suddenly at my side, his expression a mixture of relief and confusion. My king, thank the moon goddess. We thought we'd lost you. The ambush, the cursed magic. How long was I out? My voice was rough, my alpha power surging instinctively as I assessed the situation. Bodies of my attackers littered the clearing. My own warriors, the elite guard who had accompanied me, were tending their wounds at the perimeter. 20 minutes, maybe less. We were preparing the death rites when Marcus stopped, his eyes widening as he focused on something. Your Majesty, your throat. I knew what he was seeing, not the dark veins and the shadow healing. Those I could feel pulsing with residual foreign magic. No, he was staring at the mate mark that had appeared there, burning silver against my skin. The fated bond, the mark that appeared only once in a wolf's lifetime, connecting them to their destined mate. It had never appeared for me. In 300 years of life, through countless political alliances and strategic matings, the moon goddess had never seen fit to give me a true mate. I'd long ago accepted that my fate was to rule alone, to prioritize duty over the messy complications of destined love. Until now, the mark blazed on my throat, and through it I felt her, an Omega, young, terrified, running as fast as her legs could carry her, putting distance between us even as the bond screamed for her to return. And underneath her fear, I sensed a shadow magic, dark and powerful and completely forbidden. My fated mate was a practitioner of the very magic I'd spent centuries eradicating from my kingdom. Find her, I commanded, my voice sharp with alpha authority that made every wolf in the clearing snap to attention. Find the Omega who did this. I want her brought to me alive. Marcus hesitated. My king, the shadow magic. If she's a practitioner, our laws demand immediate execution. I said alive. The words came out as a growl, my wolf rising to the surface, protective instincts warring with centuries of law and order. She's my mate. The fated bond has formed. Whatever she is, whatever she's done, she's mine to deal with. The admission sent shockwaves through my guard. A cursed Omega as the Alpha King's fated mate was a political nightmare, a scandal that could undermine my authority and give my enemies leverage they'd been desperate to find. But the mate bond was absolute. It didn't care about politics or propriety or the careful balance of power I'd maintained for centuries. It simply was. Connected me to a terrified Omega who had saved my life, and then fled before I could properly claim her. She went north. One of my trackers reported, his nose to the ground. The scent is faint. She's masking it somehow, but she left a trail. Then we follow. I shifted into my wolf form, ignoring the protests of my body. The healing was complete, but shadow magic had a cost, and I felt it in the lingering weakness of my limbs. She can't have gotten far. Through the bond, I felt her fear spike as she sensed my pursuit. Good. Let her fear me. Let her understand that running from an Alpha King, especially one who was her fated mate, was the worst decision she could have made. But underneath my fury, underneath the cold calculation of a ruler dealing with threat to his kingdom, something else stirred. The bond hummed with connection, with rightness, with a cosmic certainty that this Omega cursed, forbidden, terrified, was meant to be mine, and I would have her, one way or another. I'd been hiding in the cave for hours when I felt him getting closer. The mate bond was a constant torment, pulling at me with increasing intensity as the Alpha King narrowed the distance. I could feel his determination, his fury, his cold alpha certainty that he would find me and force me to answer for what I'd done. But I could also feel something else through the bond, confusion, curiosity, and buried deep beneath his rage, a flicker of protective instinct that his wolf couldn't suppress even if his conscious mind wanted to. My shadow magic stirred restlessly beneath my skin, responding to his proximity. The mark on my wrist burned, spreading new tendrils up my arm as if my curse was preparing for confrontation. I'd never felt it this active before, never experienced the shadows pushing against my control with such insistence. It was responding to him, to the mate bond, to the fact that my fated mate was the most powerful alpha in existence, and his presence was awakening something in my magic that had been dormant my entire life. The cave entrance darkened, and I knew my time had run out. Kaelen's storm crown stood silhouetted against the moonlight, his human form no less intimidating than his wolf. He was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with broad shoulders and a warrior's build that spoke of centuries of combat. His hair was black as midnight, falling past his shoulders, and his eyes were the silver of a full moon, currently blazing with alpha authority that made my Omega instinct scream to submit. But it was a mate mark on his throat that captured my attention. Identical to mine, a silver crescent surrounded by shifting patterns, blazing with the intensity of the fated bond. "So," he said, his voice a deep rumble that resonated in my chest. "My fated mate is a cursed Omega who practices forbidden magic. The moon goddess has a cruel sense of humor." I pressed myself against the back wall of the cave, my hands raised offensively even though I knew it was pointless. He could cross the distance between us in a heartbeat, could force my submission with his alpha power, could snap my neck before I even thought to use my shadow magic. "I didn't ask for this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "The mate bond, I didn't know. If I had, I never would have. Never would have saved my life." He took a step forward, and I felt his power press against me like a physical weight. Never would have used forbidden magic, to heal wounds that should have been fatal, never would have formed a bond that now ties you to me for the rest of our lives. I should have let you die." The words came out bitter, angry. "That's what you're thinking, isn't it? That I've cursed you, tainted you with my shadow magic, forced a bond you never wanted." "Yes." His honesty was brutal. "My kingdom has laws. Forbidden magic is punishable by death. I've personally executed dozens of practitioners over the centuries, and now I discover my fated mate is exactly what I've been eradicating from my territories." He moved closer. I saw the dark veins still visible on his chest and throat, the marks my shadow healing had left. "But you saved my life. Whatever your magic is, however forbidden, it consumed a curse that should have killed me in minutes. My own healers couldn't have done that. Our light magic isn't strong enough to counter the ancient darkness my enemies use against me." His eyes, those impossible silver eyes, studied me with intensity that made me want to both flee and submit in equal measure. "So I'm going to give you one chance, Omega, one opportunity to explain what you are, where this power comes from, and why I shouldn't execute you despite the mate bond." I wanted to be brave, to stand tall and defend myself with the same defiance I'd imagined in 1,000 fantasies during my exile. But facing Kaelen's storm crown, feeling his alpha power pressing down on me, knowing he held my life in his hands, I found that defiance hard to access. "My name is Lira," I said quietly. "Lira Ashwood, formerly of the Blackwood Pack. I was rejected 3 years ago when my shadow magic manifested. Blackwood Pack." His expression darkened. "Darius Blackwood is a weak alpha who rules through fear rather than strength. But even he knows the laws about forbidden magic. He should have executed you, not merely exiled you. He tried." The memory was still sharp, still painful. The pack's executioner put a blade in my throat, but when it touched my skin, the shadows erupted. They killed him before I even realized what was happening. Darius was too afraid to try again, so he chose exile instead. I touched the mark on my wrist, feeling it pulse beneath my fingers. I don't know where the magic comes from. It appeared on my 16th birthday, the day I was supposed to have my first shift. Instead of becoming a wolf, I became this, a cursed Omega with power I can't fully control and don't understand. But you can heal with it. Kaelen's voice was thoughtful now, calculating. "You saved my life when no light magic healer could have. That's not typical shadow magic. The ancient texts describe it as destructive, corrupting, but your power consumed the curse rather than adding to it. I don't know how it works," I admitted. "I just feel the damage, the corruption, the poison, and my shadow's hungry for it. They devour the darkness, consume the injury, and leave only healing behind. But it marks the person I heal, leaves traces that others can see. The dark veins." He touched his throat with a mark for fading, but still visible. "They'll disappear? In a few days, yes. The shadows only linger temporarily." I hesitated, then asked the question I was terrified to voice. "Are you going to kill me?" The mate bond pulsed between us, and through it, I felt his internal conflict, his centuries of law and order demanding one response, his wolf demanding another, and underneath it all, the growing awareness that the mate bond wasn't just cosmic chance. It was necessity. Before he could answer, Marcus appeared at the cave entrance, his expression urgent. "My king, we have a problem. The royal healer examined your wounds and the residual magic. She says she needs to speak with you immediately about what she found." Kaelen's eyes never left mine. "Bring her here. And bring chains for the Omega. If she's coming back to Silver Peak with us, she'll do so as my prisoner until I decide what to do with her. No! I started to protest, but his alpha power crashed over me, forcing my omega instincts into submission. My knees buckled, and I found myself kneeling before him, head bowed, every part of my being responding to his dominance. "You saved my life, Lira Ashwood," he said quietly, his hand suddenly gentle as it lifted my chin, forcing me to meet his silver eyes. "That buys you a chance. But you're also a practitioner of forbidden magic, and that cannot be ignored. So you'll come to my kingdom, you'll submit to examination by my healers and scholars, and we'll discover exactly what you are, and then I'll decide whether you're my mate or my prisoner." Through the bond, I felt his words weren't entirely truthful. He'd already decided. His wolf had claimed me the moment the mate bond formed. But his human side, his king side, needed justification. Needed a reason to spare me that wouldn't undermine centuries of law. I nodded, having no other choice, as Marcus returned with silver chains specifically designed to suppress magical abilities. As they locked around my wrists, I felt my shadow magic retreat, becoming distant and inaccessible. And as Kaelen lifted me effortlessly and carried me from the cave toward whatever fate awaited in Silver Peak, I wondered if I'd merely exchanged one rejection for another, or if the mate bond would prove stronger than fear, stronger than law, stronger than centuries of prejudice against the shadows I carried. The journey to Silver Peak took 3 days. 3 days of being carried in a guarded wagon, my magic suppressed by silver chains, my mate bond screaming in protest at the physical distance Kaelen maintained. He rode ahead with his warriors, only checking on me briefly each evening, his expression unreadable as his eyes traced a mate mark on my throat. The palace itself was breathtaking, built into the side of a mountain, its towers reaching toward the peaks above, constructed from white stone that glowed faintly in the moonlight. It was beautiful, majestic, and terrifying, the seat of power for the most influential werewolf kingdom in the realm. And I was being brought here as a prisoner, not a queen. They took me directly to the healing wing, a vast chamber filled with the soft glow of light magic, the opposite of my shadows, the power that wolves considered pure and holy. The royal healer was an ancient female named Lira, her silver hair marking her as one of the oldest wolves in the kingdom. She examined me with clinical detachment, her light magic pressing against my suppressed shadows, testing, probing. Kaelen stood nearby, his arms crossed, his expression carved from stone as he watched her work. "Remarkable," Lira finally murmured, her fingers tracing the mark on my wrist. "Absolutely remarkable. Your Majesty, I need to speak with you. Privately." "Anything you need to say can be said in front of her," Kaelen replied, his eyes flicking to me. "She's my mate. She has a right to hear this." Lira's expression suggested she disagreed, but she nodded. "Very well. The Omega's magic is not what we thought. It's not forbidden shadow magic in traditional sense. It's not corruption or darkness meant to destroy." She moved to a shelf and pulled out an ancient tome, its pages yellow with age. "This is the chronicle of the first wolves, the recorded history of our kind before the Great Division, before light and shadow became enemies." She opened to a page showing an illustration. 2 wolves circling each other, one glowing with silver light, the other wreathed in shadows. "In the beginning we were balanced. Light magic and shadow magic existed in harmony. 2 halves of the same whole. Light magic built, protected, healed the living. Shadow magic consumed, purged, healed by removing corruption rather than adding power." Kaelen's eyes narrowed. The Great Division, when the shadow wolves turned to darkness and began corrupting other packs. That's the official history, Lira said carefully. But there's another version, one that's been suppressed for centuries. The shadow wolves didn't turn to darkness. They were purged by the light wolves who feared their power. The corruption they supposedly spread was actually them healing curses and dark magic that light magic couldn't touch. She turned to me, her ancient eyes suddenly gentle. Child, you're not cursed. You're one of the last true shadow healers, born with a power that was nearly eradicated from our species. Your magic doesn't corrupt. It purifies by consuming corruption. The words echoed in the chamber. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Not cursed, not an abomination, just different. A remnant of an ancient power that had been systematically destroyed because it was misunderstood. Why would this appear now? Kaelen asked, his voice tight. If shadow healers were wiped out centuries ago, why would one manifest in a random Omega? Because your kingdom needs her, Lira said simply. She turned to Kaelen with an expression that was both sympathetic and stern. Your Majesty, you know what plagues your lands. The curse that's been slowly spreading for the past decade, killing crops, poisoning water sources, driving game away. Your light healers have tried everything and nothing works. Kaelen's jaw tightened, confirming what she'd said. His kingdom was cursed, and he'd been hiding it, probably to prevent his enemies from exploiting the weakness. That curse is shadow-based, Lira continued. Ancient darkness that can only be consumed by shadow magic. Your fate had made appearing now, with exactly the power needed to save your kingdom. That's not coincidence. Your Majesty. That's the moon goddess answering a prayer you didn't know how to make. The chamber fell silent. I felt Kaelen's emotions to the mate bond, shock, denial, reluctant hope, and underneath it all, the beginning of understanding. The moon goddess didn't make mistakes. The fated bond wasn't random chance. I'd been brought to him, had saved his life, had been marked as his mate specifically because his kingdom needed what I could do. But accepting that meant accepting me, accepting the shadow magic he'd spent centuries persecuting, accepting that everything he believed about forbidden magic might be wrong. The curse, he finally said, his voice controlled. Can she break it? I believe so, Lira replied, but it won't be easy or safe. The curse is rooted in the heart of your kingdom, in the ancient ruins beneath the palace. She'll need to go there, confront the source directly, and use her full power to consume it, and it will try to consume her back. She looked at me seriously. Child, you saved the Alpha King with your shadow magic, but that was a single wound. This curse has been growing for a decade, feeding on the land itself. Using your full power against it could burn you out completely, could leave you powerless or worse. Or it could kill her, Kaelen said flatly. Yes, Lira confirmed. It could kill her. Through the mate bond, I felt his immediate, visceral rejection of that possibility. His wolf rose to the surface, protective instincts overriding centuries of careful control. I was his mate, cursed or not, and his wolf would not tolerate a plan that endangered me. But I was already making the decision. I'll do it, I said quietly. If my magic can save your kingdom, if that's why the moon goddess brought us together, then I'll do it. I've spent 3 years exiled, believing I was cursed, that my power made me a monster. If it can be used for good, if it can save innocent wolves, then it's worth the risk. Kaelen crossed the distance between us in 2 strides, his hand suddenly gripping my chin, forcing me to meet his intense silver gaze. You don't make that decision alone. You're my mate. That means your life, your safety, your future. All of it matters to me now, whether I want it to or not. Then help me understand, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Show me this curse. Let me see what we're facing, and then we'll decide together. For a long moment, we stared at each other. Alpha King and Curse Omega, fated mates bound by a bond neither of us had chosen but couldn't deny. Then he nodded, releasing me. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow I'll take you to the heart of the curse. Tonight you rest, you eat, and you prepare. Because if you're going to save my kingdom, you'll do it at full strength, not as an exhausted prisoner in chains. He gestured to Marcus. Remove the suppressors. Take her to the mate's chambers. Post guards if it makes you feel better, but she's not to be treated as a prisoner anymore. Your Majesty, Marcus started to protest. She's my mate, Kaelen said, his voice carrying absolute alpha authority that made every wolf in the room bow their heads. Fated by the moon goddess herself. Whatever she is, whatever magic she carries, she's mine protect. And I will not have her chained and caged like an animal while she prepares to risk her life for my kingdom. The silver suppressors fell away, and immediately my shadow magic surged back, stronger than ever, responding to Kaelen's acceptance and the mate bond's intensifying pull. The mark on my wrist blazed with dark light, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt the shadows not as a curse, but as power, as purpose, as mine. The ruins beneath the palace were ancient beyond measure, older than the kingdom, older than the Great Division, possibly older than the werewolf species itself. Kaelen led me through winding tunnels carved with symbols I couldn't read, past chambers that held artifacts no one remembered the purpose of, deeper and deeper until the air itself felt thick with accumulated magic. His elite guard accompanied us, Marcus and a dozen of his best warriors, all carrying weapons designed to combat magical threats. They didn't trust me, I could feel it, but they trusted their king's judgment enough to follow orders. The mate bond hummed between us, stronger now that the suppressors were gone. I could feel Kaelen's determination, his protectiveness, and buried deep beneath his alpha control, genuine fear. Not for himself, for me, for what the curse might do to his mate. We reached a massive circular chamber, and I stopped, my breath catching at the sight. The curse was visible, a massive, pulsing mass of shadow that was nothing like my magic. This was wrong, corrupted, sick. It writhed in the center of the chamber like a living thing, tendrils spreading across the floor, up the walls, consuming everything it touched. The stone itself was dying, turning black and crumbling to dust. It's been growing for 10 years, Kaelen said quietly. Started as a small patch in this chamber. Now it covers half the palace's foundation. In another year, maybe 2, it will breach the surface. And when it does, it will spread across my kingdom like wildfire, killing everything it touches. I moved closer, my shadow magic responding immediately to the corruption. The mark on my wrist burned, tendrils spreading up my arm as my power recognized a threat that needed to be consumed. Can you do it? Kaelen asked, his hand suddenly on my shoulder, warm and grounding through the mate bond. I don't know. I admitted. My healing shadows, they consume corruption, darkness, poison. But this is bigger than anything I've ever faced. If I'm not strong enough, if it overwhelms me, then I pull you out, he said firmly. The kingdom matters, but you matter more. The mate bond, he stopped, struggling with the admission, then forced himself to continue. The mate bond means I can't lose you. Not now, not when I just found you. Through the bond, I felt the truth of his words. The cold, calculating Alpha King who had hunted me, who had chained me, who represented everything I'd been taught to fear. He was terrified of losing me. The mate bond had done in days what centuries of political alliances couldn't. Made him vulnerable. "I won't fail," I promised, pressing my hand against his chest, feeling his heart race beneath my palm. "Not when we finally have a chance at something real." Before he could respond, before either of us could second-guess the decision, I turned and walked toward the corruption, my shadow magic rising like a tide. The moment I touched it, the curse attacked. Pain exploded through my body as the corrupted shadows recognized my presence and immediately tried to consume me. They were nothing like my healing shadows. These were hungry, mindless, designed only to destroy. They wrapped around my arms, burning like acid, trying to force their way into my body through every pore. I screamed and heard Kaelen roar behind me, felt him start to move toward me through the mate bond. "No!" I shouted, pouring more of my own shadow magic into the connection, creating a barrier between us. "Stay back. If it touches you, it will kill you." My shadow magic surged upward, black smoke pouring from my hands, my arms, my entire body. The mark on my wrist exploded with dark light, and I felt tendrils spreading across my chest, my back, covering every inch of exposed skin as my power rose to meet the corruption. But this time I wasn't fighting alone. Through the mate bond, I felt Kaelen's strength flowing into me. Not his magic, but his will, his alpha power, his absolute certainty that I would succeed. The bond itself became a conduit, stabilizing my shadow magic, giving it structure and purpose it had never possessed before. My healing shadows weren't just consuming the corruption, they were devouring it, breaking it down into component parts, understanding its origin and purpose. And what I discovered made me gasp. It's not a natural curse. I shouted, my voice distorted by the power flowing through me. Someone created this. Someone with shadow magic like mine, but twisted, corrupted, deliberately weaponized. Who? Kaelen's voice was sharp, commanding even through the chaos. The corruption showed me images, memories embedded in its structure, a rival alpha, one I didn't recognize, working with a dark sorceress. They created this curse specifically to destroy Silver Peak from the inside, knowing that light magic couldn't touch shadow-based corruption. Aldrich Bloodmoon. I managed to say, the name pulling itself from the curse's memory. He's behind this. He's been planning this for decades. Aldrich. Kaelen's voice was pure fury. My bastard half-brother. I should have known. But I couldn't focus on politics or revenge. The corruption was fighting back, recognizing that I was destroying it. It concentrated its power, all of it converging on me in one massive wave of darkness that threatened to overwhelm my defenses. I felt myself slipping, my shadow magic beginning to falter under the assault. The corruption was too old, too entrenched, and I was just one Omega who'd had this power for barely 3 years. The mate mark on my throat blazed with sudden, overwhelming heat. Through the bond, Kaelen's power flooded into me. Pure alpha dominance, centuries of accumulated strength, the combined will of a king who refused to let his mate fall. It wasn't magic, couldn't directly fight the curse, but it reinforced my own power, gave it structure and amplification it had never possessed. And I understood, in that moment of perfect clarity, why the moon goddess had made us mates. Light and shadow weren't meant to be enemies. Alpha strength and Omega magic weren't opposing forces. They were complementary, two halves of a whole that, when properly balanced, became something greater than either alone. My shadow magic exploded outward with renewed force, no longer just consuming corruption, but transforming it. The sick, twisted darkness was broken down into pure shadow essence, cleansed of its malicious intent. and then disperse harmlessly into the air. The corruption fought, writhed, tried desperately to maintain its hold on the palace foundations. But I was relentless, pouring everything I had into the purification, feeling Kaelen's strength supported me through every second of the battle. Finally, with a sound like breaking glass, the curse shattered. The corrupted mass dissolved into harmless smoke, the black spreading across the walls and floor fading to clean stone, the sick purple light dying completely. The chamber was suddenly silent, the oppressive weight of dark magic gone. I collapsed, my legs giving out, but Kaelen was there instantly, catching me before I hit the ground. His arms wrapped around me, supporting my exhausted body as the last of my shadow magic receded. "You did it," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You saved the kingdom." Through the rapidly fading connection I'd maintained with the curse, I felt one final pulse of information, a warning. "Kaelen," I gasped. "Aldrich, he's here, in the palace." He was waiting for the curse to weaken your defenses before he attacked. The chamber doors exploded inward. Aldrich Bloodmoon entered with an army at his back, at least 50 warriors, all wearing the colors of rogue packs united under a single banner. He was smaller than Kaelen, but moved with predatory grace, his eyes burning with ambition and bitter resentment. "Brother," he said, his voice dripping with mock concern. "I heard there was a commotion. Came as quickly as I could offer assistance. You created the curse." Kaelen's voice was deadly calm as he gently set me behind him, placing his body between me and the threat. 10 years of slow corruption, waiting for the perfect moment to strike when my kingdom was at its weakest. Aldrich's smile was sharp. "Guilty. Though I didn't expect you to find a shadow healer to break it. That was unfortunate. But no matter. Your Omega has exhausted herself saving your precious kingdom. She can barely stand, let alone fight. And you're alone with a handful of guards against my army." "I'm never alone," Kaelen said quietly. Through the mate bond, I felt his alpha power surge, felt him sending out a call that resonated through the entire palace. "I'm an Alpha King with mate and a kingdom to protect." The response was immediate. Warriors poured into the chamber from every entrance, not just the elite guard, but common soldiers, servants who'd taken up arms, even some of the palace's light healers ready to fight. They'd felt their king's call and answered without hesitation. But Aldrich had been planning this for years. His warriors were experienced, vicious, and they attacked with coordinated precision that spoke of extensive training. The chamber erupted into chaos. Wolf against wolf, the clash of fangs and claws echoing off the ancient stone. Kaelen shifted into his massive wolf form, his black fur seeming to absorb the light, his alpha power radiating in waves that forced weaker wolves to their knees. He tore into Aldrich's forces with brutal efficiency, protecting me even as he fought. But Aldrich wasn't alone either. The dark sorceress who'd helped create the curse stepped forward, her hands glowing with corrupted magic. She targeted Kaelen with a spell designed specifically to kill alpha wolves, the same type of curse magic that had nearly killed him in the original ambush. "No." The word tore from my throat as I saw the curse magic speeding toward my mate. My shadow magic exploded outward instinctively, protective fury overriding exhaustion. The dark spell hit my shadows and simply dissolved, consumed before it could reach Kaelen. The sorceress's eyes widened in shock. She'd never encountered a shadow healer before, had no defense against magic that fed on corruption. I advanced on her, my shadows writhing around me like living armor. "You created the curse that tried to destroy this kingdom. You twisted shadow magic into a weapon when it was meant to heal. You're an abomination." She threw spell after spell at me, each one more desperate than the last. But my shadows consumed them all, growing stronger with each attack. Finally, when she was drained and defenseless, my shadows wrapped around her, not to kill but to contain. "Kaelen!" I shouted over the sounds of battle. "The sorceress is neutralized." He was locked in combat with Aldrich, the two half-brothers tearing into each other with centuries of resentment fueling their movements. But Kaelen was stronger, had always been stronger, and with his mate protected and his kingdom fighting at his back, he was unstoppable. With one final, devastating strike, he had Aldrich pinned, his jaws at his half-brother's throat. Through the bond, I felt him want to end it, to kill the threat to his kingdom permanently. "Wait," I said, moving to the side. "Don't make him a martyr. Don't give his followers a reason to continue this war. Show them mercy. Show them that the Alpha King is strong enough to spare even those who try to destroy him." Kaelen's silver eyes met mine, and through the bond, I felt his internal struggle. Alpha instinct demanded death for challengers. But King Wisdom recognized the value of mercy, of ending a war before it truly began. He shifted back to human form, his hand still wrapped around Aldrich's throat. "You try to destroy my kingdom with corrupted shadow magic. You attack me with cursed spells. You brought an army into my palace. By every law, you deserve execution." Aldrich's eyes burned with hatred, but also fear. He'd gambled everything on this attack, and lost. But my mate, my shadow healer, has reminded me that strength isn't just about killing your enemies. It's about showing them why they lost. Kaelen's voice carried to every wolf in the chamber. "You lose because I have something you don't. A mate who completes me. A kingdom that answers my call without question. Power that comes from balance, not corruption." He threw Aldrich toward his warriors. "You and your followers are exiled. Leave Silver Peak and never return. If I see any of you on my lands again, there will be no mercy, no trial, just death. Am I understood?" Aldrich nodded, defeated, and his army retreated, dragging their wounded and their captured sorceress. The battle was over. The chamber cleared slowly, warriors returning to their posts, healers tending the wounded. Marcus gave me a long, assessing look, no longer hostile, but not quite friendly. Respectful, perhaps. I'd proven myself by saving both their king and their kingdom. Kaelen turned to me, and through the mate bond, I felt emotions he couldn't quite voice. Relief, pride, desire, and underneath it all, the overwhelming recognition that everything had changed. "You saved me," he said quietly. "Again, you've saved me twice now, Lira Ashwood. Once with your healing, and once with your wisdom." "You saved me too," I replied, touching the mate mark on my throat. "You gave me purpose. Showed me my magic wasn't a curse, but a gift. Gave me a reason to be proud of what I am instead of ashamed." He cupped my face in his hands, his silver eyes intense. "I was wrong. About shadow magic, about you, about everything I thought I knew. The moon goddess knew what she was doing when she made you my mate. You're not a curse. You're exactly what I needed, what my kingdom needed, what our species needed." "So what happens now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm still a rejected Omega, still in exile from my birth pack. Still—" "You're mine," he interrupted, his voice absolute. "My mate, my shadow healer, and if you'll accept it, my queen." The words hung in the air between us, weighted with possibility and promise. "I spent 3 years believing I was cursed," I said slowly. "Believing my magic made me a monster, that I deserved to be rejected and alone. But you looked at my shadows and saw power instead of corruption. You looked at me and saw a mate instead of an abomination. I placed my hand over his heart, feeling it race beneath my palm. So yes, Kaelen Stormground, I'll be your mate, your healer, and your queen. I'll stand beside you, balance your light with my shadows, and show the entire werewolf world that forbidden magic was never the problem. Fear was. He kissed me then, and the mate bond exploded between us, no longer tentative or conflicted, but absolute and undeniable. Through it, I felt everything he'd been holding back: desire, possession, protectiveness, and something deeper that felt like the beginning of love. When we finally broke apart, he turned to address the remaining wolves in the chamber, his voice carrying alpha authority that made every wolf straighten to attention. Let it be known throughout Silver Peak and beyond, Lira Ashwood, shadow healer and my fated mate, is under my protection. She is to be afforded every honor due to a queen. Any who question her power or her place at my side will answer to me directly. He pulled me against his side, publicly claiming me in a way that left no room for doubt or challenge. She saved your king. She saved your kingdom. She proved that shadow magic, properly wielded, is not corruption but purification, and she will be the mother of the next generation of Silver Peak wolves. Children who will carry both light and shadow, both alpha strength and omega magic. Through the bond, I felt his absolute certainty, not just about the claiming, but about the future. About us. Marcus stepped forward and, to my shock, bowed deeply. "My queen," he said formally, "Silver Peak is honored by your presence." One by one, the other wolves followed suit, bowing to the cursed Omega who had saved their kingdom, acknowledging me not as a threat, but as their queen. The formal coronation happened 3 days later, giving the kingdom time to spread the news and prepare for the unprecedented event. A rejected Omega becoming queen was scandal enough. A shadow healer standing beside the Alpha King was revolutionary. But Kaelen was absolute in his decision, and his power was undeniable. Those who might have objected found themselves facing their king's unwavering certainty, and eventually acceptance spread through the kingdom. I stood in the royal chambers, staring at my reflection in the floor-length mirror. The coronation gown was beautiful, black as midnight with silver embroidery that caught the light, designed to honor my shadow magic rather than hide it. The mate mark on my throat was fully visible, proudly displayed, and the curse mark on my wrist had transformed. It was no longer a symbol of shame, but a badge of honor, its tendrils spreading in elegant patterns up my arm. Lira entered, her ancient face showing something that might have been satisfaction. "You clean up well, child. Though I preferred you fierce and fighting rather than all dressed up." I laughed. "I can still be fierce. The dress doesn't change who I am." "No," she agreed, "but it announces who you become. The Shadow Queen, the balance to the Alpha King's light. The first of what I hope will be many shadow healers to return to our species." She moved closer, her expression turning serious. "The mate bond with Kaelen has strengthened your power. I can sense it. Your shadow magic is more controlled, more focused. That's what happens when light and shadow properly balance. They amplify each other. I can feel it too," I admitted. "It's like my magic finally has structure, purpose. Before it was wild, barely controlled. Now it feels like an extension of my will." "That's because you finally have someone who accepts all of you," Lira said gently. "Your first alpha rejected you for your power. Kaelen claimed you because of it. That acceptance makes all the difference." A knock at the door announced Kaelen's arrival. He entered in full royal regalia, black and silver, commanding and beautiful. every inch the Alpha King. But when he looked at me, his silver eyes softened with something that looked like wonder. "You're stunning," he said, crossing the room to take my hands. "Though you be stunning in anything, or nothing." Through the mate bond, I felt the heat of his desire, the possessive pride he took in claiming me publicly. But I also felt something deeper, genuine respect for what I'd accomplished, what I represented. "Are you ready?" he asked. "The entire kingdom is waiting. Once we do this, there's no going back. You'll be queen, bound to me not just by the mate bond, but by duty and crown." "I've been in exile for 3 years," I replied. "I've been rejected, cursed, hunted, and nearly destroyed by the very magic I was born with. But I've also saved your life, broken a decade-long curse, and fought beside you against your enemies. I'm ready for whatever comes next." He kissed me softly, carefully, mindful of the formal makeup and styling, but the mate bond flared with the contact, reinforcing the connection between us. "Then let's show them," he said, offering his arm. "Let's show the entire kingdom what happens when light and shadow stop fighting and start working together." The throne room was packed with wolves from across the kingdom. Nobles and commoners, warriors and healers, all gathered to witness history. The massive chamber was decorated in both silver and black, acknowledging both light and shadow magic for the first time in centuries. As Kaelen and I entered, walking down the central aisle toward the twin thrones, I felt every eye on us. Some looked curious, some skeptical, but many, especially the younger wolves, looked hopeful that the old prejudices were finally dying, that shadow magic could be reclaimed from fear and corruption. The high priest conducted the ceremony, his voice carrying throughout the chamber as he spoke the ancient words of coronation. But when it came time to crown me, Kaelen took the silver circlet from the priest's hands and placed it on my head himself. "Lira Ashwood," he said, his voice formal but his eyes warm. "Shadow healer, fated mate, and savior of Silverpeak, I claim you not just as my mate, but as my equal. You are queen of Silverpeak, shadow to my light, balance to my strength. You stand beside me, not behind me, not beneath me, but as a partner in all things." He turned to address the assembled wolves. "Let any who doubt her power remember that she broke a curse my light healers couldn't touch. Let any who question her worthiness remember that she risked her life to save a kingdom that had exiled her kind. And let any who think shadow magic is evil remember that she used it to heal, to protect, to save." His voice rose, carrying alpha command that made every wolf straighten. "Lira is your queen. Shadow magic is no longer forbidden in Silverpeak. It is honored, celebrated, protected. We will no longer persecute those born with this gift. Instead, we will train them, guide them, help them become the healers and protectors they were always meant to be." The proclamation sent shockwaves through the assembly. Centuries of law overturned in a single declaration. But Kaelen's authority was absolute, and his reasoning was undeniable. I'd proven that shadow magic, properly used, was not just harmless but essential. "Do you accept your crown, Lira Ashwood?" the high priest asked formally. I looked out at the assembled wolves, at the kingdom that had once feared people like me, at the wolves who were learning to see shadow magic as gift rather than curse. And I thought of every rejected Omega, every exile hiding in the borders, every shadow-touched wolf who'd been persecuted for powers they didn't choose. "I accept," I said clearly, "not just for myself, but for every shadow-touched wolf who's been made to feel like a monster. We are healers. We are protectors. We are the balance that light magic needs, and we will no longer hide in shame." The crown settled on my head, warm and heavy, and the mate mark on my throat blazed with silver light visible to every wolf in the room. The mate bond between Kaelen and me pulsed with such intensity that several sensitive wolves gasped, feeling the echo of our connection. Then something unexpected happened. The mark on my wrist, the curse mark that had branded me an outcast, began to glow, not with dark, ominous light, but with silver radiance that matched the mate mark on my throat. The shadowy tendrils spreading on my arm transformed before everyone's eyes, becoming elegant patterns that looked like they'd been tattooed with liquid moonlight. Illyra's voice carried from where she stood among the healers. The moon goddess marked her approval. Shadow and light, curse and blessing, darkness and radiance, all balanced in one wolf. The assembled wolves dropped to one knee, not in submission, but in recognition that something fundamental had changed, that the old prejudices were truly dying, that a new era was beginning. Kaelen took my hand, raising it high as he addressed his kingdom one final time. Behold your shadow queen. May her darkness consume our enemy's corruption. May her power protect the innocent, and may her courage inspire us all to embrace the balance we denied for too long. The throne room erupted in howls, voices raised in celebration, in acceptance, in the acknowledgement of something unprecedented. And through the mate bond, I felt Kaelen's fierce pride, his possessive satisfaction, and his unwavering certainty that this was right. We'd found balance, light and shadow, alpha and omega, king and queen, and nothing would ever be the same. Later that night, after the celebration had quieted and the palace had settled into peaceful rest, Kaelen and I stood on the royal balcony overlooking Silver Peak. The kingdom spread below us, lights twinkling in the darkness, the curse's damage already beginning to heal now that corruption was gone. "Do you have any regrets?" he asked, his arm wrapped around my waist, holding me close. 3 days ago, you were in exile hiding in caves. Now you're a queen with a kingdom's weight on your shoulders. No regrets, I said honestly. Well, maybe one. I wish I could have told my 16-year-old self, the girl who thought she was cursed and broken, that everything would work out, that the magic she feared would become her greatest strength, that she'd find a mate who loved her shadows as much as her light. Through the bond, I felt Kaelen smile. Love, is that what this is? I turned to face him, my hands on his chest. What would you call it? This bond that makes me feel complete for the first time in my life? This connection that let us fight together, survive together, rule together? I'd call it inevitable, he said softly. The moon goddess knew what she was doing when she made you mine. You're not just my mate, Lira. You're my conscience, my balance, my proof that strength comes in many forms. He kissed me deeply, and the mate bond sang between us, no longer conflicted or uncertain, but absolute and perfect. When we finally broke apart, I looked out at kingdom again, at the land I'd saved, the wolves I'd proven myself to, the future I'd claimed through courage and shadow magic. I'm no longer the rejected Omega, I said quietly. I'm no longer the cursed exile hiding from the world. I'm the Shadow Queen who saved Silver Peak. I'm the healer who proved that darkness isn't evil. It's just misunderstood power waiting for the right purpose. Kaelen pulled me closer, his voice a rumble against my ear. You're mine. That's what you are. My mate, my queen, my balance. And gods help anyone who tries to challenge that. Through the bond, I felt his absolute certainty, his unwavering commitment, and his fierce, possessive pride in the Omega who defied every expectation and claimed her place at his side. I smiled, touching the twin marks on my throat and wrist, both glowing softly in the moonlight, both symbols of a power I'd once feared but now embraced. I was rejected for my shadows, I said, my voice carrying on the night wind. But those shadows saved a kingdom, healed a king, and changed the course of history. I'm not cursed, I'm blessed, and I'm exactly where I was always meant to be. Kaelen's arms tightened around me, and together we stood watching over our kingdom. Light and shadow, Alpha and Omega, king and queen. Balanced, complete, unbreakable. The Shadow Queen and her Alpha King, proving to the entire world that sometimes the most powerful magic comes from accepting the darkness within and using it to heal rather than harm. And as the moon rose high over Silver Peak, the mate marks on our throats blazed with silver light, a beacon of hope for every shadow-touched wolf, still hiding in exile, proof that rejection wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning, the end.
If you love stories about rejected heroines rising up to claim their destiny, hit the like button. Subscribe for weekly stories about fated mates, forbidden powers, and omegas who refuse to stay down. Comment below. What would you do if you discovered you had forbidden magic? Would you hide it or embrace it? Let me know.